Runners lane interference in the World Series. This is the second consecutive year this has happened. It happened in 2018. They no-called it. I wrote an article saying they probably should have called it. This year, I get to write another article saying this is the rule, this is the explanation, and I know you've already made up your mind within 5 seconds of watching the replay, and I'm going to try to explain it to you whether you want to listen to me or not. Because when controversial calls like these happen, a lot of times the preconceived judgment of people, without any regard to what the rule actually says, seals the day. They don't want to hear, people do not want to hear what the logic is, so they thumb down the video or thumb up it if they agree with the call, or thumb down if they disagree with the call. And that's fine. But let's do something that the Fox broadcast completely failed to do, which is cite the actual rule. And then we'll break it down. A batter is out when, in running the last half of the distance from home base to first base while the ball is being fielded to first base, he runs outside to the right of the 3-foot line or inside to the left of the foul line, and in the umpire's judgment, in doing so, interferes with the fielder taking the throw at first base, in which case the ball is dead. Comment. The batter runner is permitted to exit the 3-foot lane by means of a step, stride, reach, or slide in the immediate vicinity of first base for the sole purpose of touching first base. Wow. Let's break it down by its parts, because then we're going to talk about the history of the rule going back to the 1800s, and then we're going to talk about previous plays that may or may not have been runners lane interference from earlier this year and beyond, because that's how detailed and thorough we are. Imagine that. A batter is out when? Pretty self-explanatory. In running the last half of the distance from home base to first base, so we are concerned about not the whole distance, but just that 45-foot line all the way to first. Just what's the line that is painted on the ground that signifies the 3-foot lane. That's all we care about. While the ball is being fielded to first base, so while the ball is being thrown or otherwise played to first base, which is what happened here, he runs outside to the right of, that means on the dugout, the foul territory side, or inside to the left of, that means fair territory, the foul line. And in doing so I just want to clarify that the language is confusing. Outside is bad, inside is bad. What we're looking for is within. So the language is weird, but just remember the buzzword. Within is good, everything else is bad. And in the umpire's judgment call can't be reviewed or protested for that matter. In doing so, interferes with the fielder taking the throw at first base. So did he impede, hinder, or otherwise make the fielder's life more difficult in trying to complete a play in an illegal manner? In which case, the ball is dead. Ball dead means time. Runners have to go back. So the runner that started the play on first base has to go back to first base. And the batter's out. Comment. The batter or runner is permitted to exit the 3-foot lane by means of a step, stride, reach, or slide in the immediate vicinity of first base for the sole purpose of touching first base. Keyword. Exit. In order to exit something, you have had to be within it. You cannot exit something that you've never been within. So if he runs the entire length down to first base, especially that last 45 feet, because that's all we care about. We don't care about the first 45. So when Strasburg says, oh, the hit took him into fair territory, he had 45 feet to correct that. So that doesn't matter. We're just talking about the last 45. If he's never within the lane, he cannot exit the lane, and he's not protected, because in order to be protected, you have to exit. Okay, that's fun. Let's talk about the history of the rule. Quickly, in 1882, the National League adopted the runner's lane, because at that time in baseball, first base was half in fair territory and half in foul territory. And there were a lot of collisions at first base between batters and fielders. So they instituted this first base collision rule. Sound familiar? And it's called the runner's lane. And it says, batter, take the foul side of first base. Fielder, take the fair side of first base. We're going to paint a line on the ground for the batter runner so he knows where to go. And that seemed to work fine because collisions went down. 1884, the American Association adopts it, and in 1887, something else happens. They decide to move first and third base from its half fair, half foul orientation to fully fair territory. It makes it a lot easier to figure out if a ball is fair or foul when the entire base is in fair territory. So that's why they did it, to make it easier to figure that out. But they had this runner's lane that they didn't do anything with, because they moved first and third without any regard for how that would affect the runner's lane. So they kept the runner's lane because they didn't think of it. And now you have this runner's lane in foul territory, but the base is in fair territory. So what do? They added a comment saying, okay, batter, you can exit the lane in order to touch first base, but only in that final step. And that's where things get tough. That's the history of the rule. So you know the history of the rule, and now we talk about the interpretations of the rule, which are used by the umpires to call the rule and enforce the rule as it is currently written. Do they change it this offseason? Another discussion for another time. First interpretation that is used by the umpires to call this play: a runner who has advanced the entire distance from home plate to first in fair territory, making no effort to run within the lane, is not extended the same leniency as the runner who runs in the lane is required and then cuts into fair territory near the base to touch it. Or in other words, a runner that is running the entire distance outside of the running lane will not be protected if he interferes with the play at first base, even if it is in his last stride or step to the base. In order to be protected, that last step must be when he first exits the running lane. Maybe that's the wrong emphasis. This last step must be when he first exits the running lane. Maybe that's the correct emphasis. Recall that in order to exit, one must first be within. You cannot exit that which you were never within in the first place. Simple, but complicated. Now, one of the things that people said was, he was going to beat it. He beat the ball to the base. The throw was bad. It wasn't what we call a true throw. But that's not the rule. Remember, we have to talk about what the rule says. We don't care about if he beat the ball to the base. Because why? The fielder is standing on the base. He's in front of the base. He's stretching in front of the base to catch the ball. So we don't need to wait for the ball to get to the base. We're looking for a point of contact in front of the base. So the runner gets to the base, but the ball gets to the fielder's glove, which is ideally in front of the base. In this case, most certainly is. And what the turning point here is contact between the players, between Gurriel's glove and Turner's body, occurs prior to the ball getting there and prior to Turner getting to the base. That's what I need to know, that the contact between the players came before potential contact with the ball. That tells me there's interference. Now, is it RLI or not? The answer is, it is, because the runner was never within the lane. In order to be safe, Turner has to do one small thing: run within the lane and then exit the base. If all else equal, this same exact contact occurs in the same exact way, but the only difference is that Turner is running legally within the lane until that last step to first base, this is a no call, and he is safe. There is no interference. But because he runs the entire length of that 45-foot line, inside or outside the line, but not within the line, this is interference. This is absolutely runner's lane interference. Because the determination is not whether the throw is true, but whether it could still reasonably retire the runner. And it's not would. We're not saying, oh yeah, he would have gotten him. We don't care about would. We're talking about could. Could it have reasonably retired him? And in this case, the answer is, I don't know. And when the answer is, I don't know, the benefit of the doubt by rule goes to the defense, because the offense is the one who has committed the infraction by failing to run within the running lane. Very complicated way of saying he got this call right. But not because it's simply interference, and not because simply Turner failed to run within the running lane the entire time, but because of a combination of the two. If both elements are there, there was interference and the runner failed to run within the lane. If both things are there, you have runner's lane interference. If one of those two attributes is missing, there is no interference. I have both attributes, therefore I have runner's lane interference. Let's talk about history. Why don't they call this? This has never been called before. Why do they choose the World Series to enforce these weird rules? Well, guys, it has been called before. We in July 2009, I'm just talking about this season, Chris Siegel ejected Jeff Bannister for arguing a runner's lane interference call against the Rangers because Carlos Tocci was not in the lane, within the lane at any point during his advancement from home to first base. That final 45 feet, he failed to run within the lane. And the throw, in that case, was actually going into foul territory. The difference here is the throw never went to foul territory. And you say, oh, yeah, it was going there. Let's talk about physics. Turner gets hit with the ball when he is going to step on first base. If he gets hit with the ball that is being thrown from a position in fair territory, well within fair territory was where Peacock was, and Turner gets hit with the ball, and Turner is fully within fair territory, then by physics of a ball going from point A, Peacock, to point B, Turner, the ball was 100% in fair territory the entire time. Therefore, the ball was going to be in fair territory when it got to the fielder Gurriel, had his glove not been knocked off by colliding with the batter runner Turner. And you're going to say, well, he initiated the contact, so it's on the defense. It's his fault. And again, the benefit of the doubt is the defense, not the offense. The defense is allowed to play his position. It's like goalie interference in the NHL. You are allowed to play your position. It doesn't matter if he's the one who initiates the contact, so to speak, or not. If he's actually trying to move his glove in the direction of the baseball and gets impeded by the batter runner who is illegally positioned, then it's the illegally positioned person's fault, not the fielder's fault, even if he's the one who initiated the contact. Okay, so anywho, Bannister gets tossed by Siegel for a very similar play, except that the ball was going more toward foul territory than it was here, and that was runner's lane interference. So if that's runner's lane interference, this is certainly runner's lane interference. And we have a slew of similar plays that I'm just going to put up on the screen because this is not that rare of a call. It's a rare play because usually you don't have this play happen in baseball, but we have enough games that are played over the course of the season where it repeats itself. This is not an unusual call. This is not something that they're suddenly trying to enforce. This is a gutsy call by Holbrook that, in this case, and because it's Holbrook, I'll mention the infield fly just because it's the same guy. When it was the infield fly, I said the call was right, but I completely understand when you say the call is wrong because it's a judgment thing. Maybe the fielder wasn't camped under the ball, or camp's not part of the rule. Maybe the fielder did not have an opportunity to play that with reasonable effort. I disagreed, but I understood the judgment if you said that there was the reasonable effort aspect of that was not there. In this case, I cannot get on board with someone saying this is not runner's lane interference. I think Holbrook's call here is more correct than his infield fly rule call was, which was also a correct call, simply because in this case, I don't think there's any room to say that there was no interference. This is absolutely interference. It must be called whenever it happens. Last year, I don't think they officiated the runner's lane interference play correctly because they didn't call anything in the World Series when I felt there was runner's lane interference. This time around, I 100% say there was runner's lane interference. If Holbrook does not call this, there is an argument from Houston. And Houston would be correct. Had Holbrook ejected Hinch and not called this, I would have had an article and video up saying that he was wrong because he didn't call it. But he did call it here. It's a gutsy call. You have to call it, even if it is the world's biggest stage and you could determine a championship. The rules do not suddenly shut off just because it is late in the World Series and a championship is on the line. The rules apply from spring training game 1 to the final out of the World Series or a walk-off run being scored, what have you. In this case, it's runner's lane interference. It must be called. Holbrook nails the call. It's correct. Read the article. Watch the video. CloseCallSports.com, at Umpire Ejections on Twitter and Facebook, and subscribe to this channel for more content. It's a lengthy video, but it's a very detailed and thorough one. Thanks for watching.